Thank you for staying glued to QTV. Time now for the news. The National Democratic Congress, NDC, has challenged its deregistration by the Registrar of Societies in the High Court. Agriculture Minister Michael Katambo has dismissed assertions that government has reintroduced price controls on maize. And the opposition UPND says all its members of parliament will vote against the Constitutional Amendment Bill number 10. Here now is the news in detail. The National Democratic Congress Party, NDC, has commenced judicial review proceedings in the High Court to challenge the Registrar of Societies' decision to deregister the party. The Registrar of Societies has cancelled the registration certificate of the NDC following a High Court ruling of 16th July 2019 in a matter where some members of the NDC took each other to court. But NDC leader Chishimba Kambwili says the Registrar of Societies has no powers to deregister his party, adding that the party has not received any deregistration letter, but that only came to know about it on social media. Dr. Kambwili says the decision by Registrar of Societies to deregister his party is illegal and an abuse of authority. Speaking at a media briefing, Dr. Kambwili says the Registrar's pronouncement is not supported by any law in Zambia. He has wondered why the Registrar of Societies has deregistered his party without engaging the aggrieved parties, as stipulated under Section 13 of the Registrar of Societies Act. Dr. Kambwili has directed his lawyers to sue the Registrar of Societies, Tandiu Mhende, in her own capacity for what he has termed as misbehavior in the public service. He states that there is no law backing the Registrar of Societies to deregister a political party if there is a lacuna in its constitution.
When we went to register NDC, we were not told that the constitution was defective. She accepted it, registered us, and we have been paying annual returns. How can she come today and say that the constitution is inoperative? This shows you that she's acting in a manner that does not conform to a requirement in that office. There is no reason under Section 13 that the registrar can register a political party if there is a lacuna in the Constitution. Because what is there in our Constitution is just a lacuna. And what you do to correct the lacuna is just to amend. And let me make mention that in May, and we've got all the correspondence stamped by the registrar's office, in May, long before we went to court, we took an amended constitution to the registrar by way of a resolution and notice, which she has in her office. How then can she say that our constitution is defective?
Meanwhile, Mr. Kambwili has condemned President Edgar Lungu's unending international trips amidst high prices of meal and other challenges facing the country.
Amidst hostility measures, he has decided 3 days he was in Tanzania. He came back to the country only 2 days. He jumped on another plane to go to India. 2 days he came back, he jumped on another plane to go to Japan. Did we elect a president, Kamwendo Munjila, or John Walker? We elected a president to sit in the office and resolve issues affecting the people of Zambia.
Minister of Agriculture Michael Katambo has refuted claims that government has reintroduced price controls on maize. Mr. Katambo has noted that where grain is concerned, Zambia has a liberalized economy and market. Hence, farmers have the right to sell as they wish in situations where they find a better market. The minister has, however, stated that government has had to engage millers and other stakeholders on the escalating price of maize, adding that it is a matter of great concern, knowing that maize is the country's staple food. He has told journalists in Lusaka that the government did not dictate to the millers, manufacturers, or the Grain Traders Association of Zambia with regards to the price of maize, but that it was a measure of engaging each other in trying to find a solution to stabilize the purchase of the country's staple food. Mr. Katambo adds that the meeting therefore overwhelmingly decided that a bag of maize was to be bought at 130 kwacha, which should see the price of roller meal ranging between 80 and 90 kwacha, and a breakfast from 100 to less than 115 kwacha, which is affordable to all Zambians. He observes that people have been complaining about the escalating prices of milo meal, and it was the mandate of government to engage players in the maize subsector in order to put a stoppage to the situation and bring about an amicable solution. Zambia National Farmers Union ZNFU President Jervis Zimba, in a statement issued in Lusaka yesterday, accused the Minister of Agriculture of reintroducing price controls on maize. Mr. Zimba further claimed that Mr. Katambo met with stock feed producers, millers and traders and threatened or coerced them to impose the price of 130 kwacha, 50 kilogram bag of maize, with full support from the Food Reserve Agency FRA, down on the basis of price controls. The opposition UPND says all its members of parliament will vote against the Constitution Amendment Bill number 10 of 2019. Leader of the opposition in parliament, who is also Monze, member of parliament, Jack Mwimbu, says the party cannot support the bill in its current form. Mr. Mwimbu states that the UPND is on the other side of the people who are opposing the constitution amendments proposed by the PF government. In an interview with Q News, Mr. Mwimbu says the UPND is, however, open to genuine dialogue where issues pertaining to the Republican Constitution and other related matters can be discussed. He notes that it is through genuine dialogue that the UPND believes issues that need to be addressed in the Constitution can be brought out and made known to the people. Mr. Mwimbu says in the absence of dialogue, the UPND will not support maneuvers pertaining to amending the country's supreme law.
The position of the UPND is that we are not supporting the amendment as proposed by the PF government arising from the NDF resolutions. We are on the side of the people who are opposing this particular amendment. When it comes to voting on the floor of the House, we are not going to support it, we vote against it. We have been calling for a genuine dialogue where issues of the Constitution and other related matters have to be discussed. And once we finalize the discussion, issues that should be taken and be brought to the Constitution will come out and the nation will be informed. For the time being, we don't support any maneuvers whatsoever pertaining to the amendment of the Constitution.
The Zambian High Commission in Pretoria, South Africa, has issued a travel advisory advising Zambian truck drivers intending to travel to that country between the 1st and the 4th of September 2019 not to do so until security is guaranteed. This follows the threats of violence against some Zambian truck drivers during a planned nationwide work stoppage by South African truck drivers. In a statement issued to Q News, First Secretary for Press and Public Relations at the Zambian mission in Pretoria, Naomi Nyawali, says according to information made available to the mission, some Zambian truck drivers have faced physical attacks and threats from their South African counterparts who are fighting for better conditions of service from their employers. She says a notice from an identified association claiming to represent South African truck drivers has been issued calling for a nationwide work stoppage among South African drivers from the 2nd of September. Mrs. Nyawali says the mission is advising Zambian truck drivers who will enter or will be working in South Africa on the 2nd of September 2019 to park their trucks in safe and secure designated places in order to avoid loss of life and property. The Civil Society for Poverty Reduction has called on governments to double up relief food distribution efforts in the country. CSPR Acting Executive Director Juliet Ilunga says government should also consider remapping and prioritizing the most adversely affected areas in southern and western provinces, targeting those communities that have deteriorated into famine hotspots. Ms. Ilunga says in order for the relief food distribution to be effective and responsive, government should distribute the relief maize in large quantities to avoid situations where families share one bag of meal. She says it is unfortunate that in a country that is food secure, 3 families in Singani ward of Choma, Southern Province, have to share one by 12.5 kg bag of meal. Meanwhile, Ms. Ilunga has called on Zambians to help affected communities in any way that they can by sharing information on the most affected areas, fundraising for relief food, water and other amenities.
Resource challenges where maybe government needs more support, so we're calling on government to maybe society organizations or other institutions that can help in the distribution of this food so that we can meet the needs of those who are directly affected. We're concerned about this hunger situation because, of course, when people are hungry, there are always negative impacts. When we talk about children, I think they'll be malnourished if they do not get adequate food. When we talk about school-going children, their cognitive capacity will be affected. They cannot concentrate in class when they're hungry.
The government has been accused of deliberately making the office of the public protector ineffective. Civil rights activist Brenba Changala says had government been interested in fully operationalizing the public protector's office, it would have by now come up with a public service commission bill. Mr. Changala says for misunderstanding of its mandate, the office of the public protector is supported and supposed to represent its investigations and recommendations to the Public Service Commission at Parliament. He tells QTV News that he is also concerned that if the Constitution Amendment Bill number 10 of 2019 is passed into law, it will take away some of the powers of the Office of the Public Protector. Mr. Changala has since urged Zambians not to allow this to happen. He says the Office of the Public Protector is an institution that has the mandate to make both the Republican president and government to account.
Even in this new bill, Bill 10, there is an assault on the public protector. Read it very carefully. They want to reduce his mandate, reduce its powers, so that everything must be done by the presidency. And the financial mismanagement in this country emanates from the presidency. The presidency is a culprit. The presidency is an accused. The president is misbehaving, and the president needs somebody who can call them to check, somebody who can call the president to account. As it were now, he does everything as he feels like. Is the wastage. I will repeat, the presidency is the wastage, and he does not account for anything many times. So I call upon the people of Zambia to protect now the public protector as it stands in the Act of Parliament. Nothing must be reduced from that institution. It's our last hope in hell.
Patriots for Economic Progress PEP President Sean Tembo is disappointed with the continued failure by government to find alternative solutions to the load shedding which has affected economic activities across the country. Mr. Tembo notes that government is or was aware of the drought and therefore had no time to find alternative solutions such as importing power from other countries in the region such as Mozambique, which had enough rains during the last rainy season. He says the economic cost of load shedding outweighs the cost of importing power from other countries in the region. Mr. Tembo has also recalled how government increased electricity tariffs by more than 50% about 2 years on the basis of cost-reflective tariffs in order to attract investments in the energy sector.
We are greatly disappointed with the fact that the government has failed to come up with a tangible plan to address the issue of load shedding, which has now been extended to as widely as 12 hours a day. This is particularly because not so long ago the government announced to the people that they would increase tariffs for electricity for the purpose of attracting investment in the energy sector. And as citizens, we sacrificed in terms of having to pay higher ZESCO tariffs with the hope that government would basically ensure energy security for the country. But the people having done their part, it appears that the government have failed to do their part. And it's been more than 2 years now. We are still being told that whenever there is a shortfall in rain, then we are going to have a power deficit, which basically adversely affects businesses, both in terms of large businesses like the mines, who are not able to operate their copper smelters, as well as small businesses like barbershops and salons in compounds and other areas. To us, this is evidence enough that the Patriotic Front government lacks the competence needed to run the affairs of the nation.
Energy Minister Matthew Nkuwa says government considers the need to decongest the Lusaka fuel depot of fuel tankers as an emergency. Mr. Nkuwa says government has observed that the number of fuel tankers that are marooned at the depot has now become a hazard. He says government's concern is that if a fire accident was to occur at the depot, there could be serious destruction to the entire Zambian economy. Mr. Nkuwa has told the QTV News that government is therefore embarking on the construction of a much bigger Lusaka fuel depot along Mumba Road, which should be ready for use by mid next year. He says money being used to add on fund the constitution of the depot is from strategic reserves, adding that funding therefore depends on how quickly government manages to build up the reserves.
We are doing one in Lusaka, a very big fuel depot in Lusaka on the Mumba Road, because you know where those trucks are parking. It's a hazard, and this is an emergency for us. I mean, when you look at what happened in Tanzania, where 62 or 65 people died, we don't want a situation like that to happen, because where they park there, it's not conducive. If anything happens, it can cause a lot of destruction to the whole economy. So we are building one depot in Lusaka and in Choma as well. But we are using strategic reserve funds to build these depots. So it depends on how quickly we build up on these funds, and that's how quickly we can build.
African countries have been urged to take advantage of the 7th Tokyo International Conference on African Development, TICAD, that will provide a splendid opportunity for businesses to explore new markets for trade and investment. The 3-day TICAD Summit, which will be held from the 28th to the 30th of August in Yokohama, has become a major global platform through which Asian and African countries, as well as international stakeholders, can collaborate to promote Africa's development. Japanese ambassador to Zambia, Sobashima Hodenebu, says the conference will enhance trade and investment between Africa and Japan, thereby allowing voices of the private sector to be heard by African and Japanese leaders. Mr. Hidenobu has told journalists at a major briefing that the conference will also provide an open and international forum where anyone can freely discuss and collaborate for African development. President Edgar Lungu is among other African leaders expected to attend the summit.
Therefore, as I said in the summit meeting, there was a time slot for Japanese business leaders to participate in the discussion with the African leaders. And in addition, as I explained, that there was hundreds of side events to sort of arouse interests both ways. The Africans participating the TICAD 7, and also Japanese, including business people, in participating in TICAD to arouse their interest. So this should be the useful tools, the fora for Japanese business people.
Minister of Tourism and Arts Ronald Chitotela has declared 11 heritage sites in the country as national monuments. The 11 sites are Mulungushi Rock of Authority in Kabwe, Mukuyu Bridge in Samfya, Chinyonyo Hot Springs in Rufunza, Mpezeni Royal Burial Site in Chipata, Kabwe Mine Museum, Kavalamanja, Kakaru Liberation Heritage in the site in Luangwa, and Chipota Falls in Serenje. Others are Broken Hill Man Site in Kabwe, Kalonga Gawa Undi Dole Royal Site, Longola Hot Springs in Itejiteji, and Tabatite in Kabwe. Speaking when he made the announcement, Mr. Chitotela says the new declarations bring the total number of national monuments in the country to 102 out of over 4,000 cultural and natural heritage sites. He adds that the declaration process is an ongoing exercise aimed at adding value to heritage sites.
We are doing very well at international scene, where Zambia today is the chair of the UNWTO Executive Council. We need also to begin promoting desire by the local citizens to appreciate tourism. Therefore, today we are declaring 11 more sites as monument sites so that we can begin promoting internal or local tourism among the local citizens. And this area, the National Heritage Conservation Commission will be able to manage the 11 areas that will be declared as the monument sites. This is a body created under the Ministry of Tourism and Arts, charged with the responsibility of conserving the conservation of the culture and the national heritage of our country. One of the key functions of this body is to declare sites as the national monuments. The national monuments declaration means that some sites are of a national importance and deserves national recognition.
Lusaka Province Minister Boma Lusambo says his office has received a lot of complaints from both local and international business communities with regards to the high rentals being charged by shopping mall owners. Speaking when a delegation from Edcon group of companies, under which Jets and Edgars fall, paid a courtesy call on him at his office, Mr. Lusambo says he is engaging the Ministry of Commerce, Trade and Industry over the issue of high rentals to see if a consensus can be reached. Mr. Lusambo is hopeful that plans by the Edcon Group to downsize on its operations will negatively affect Zambia, stating that the government wants to see to it that the private sector succeeds as it is key in ensuring the country's economic development. He has urged Edcon Group of companies to evaluate their business operations and take measures that will not affect the employment they have created so far in the country, as well as their contribution to the country's GDP.
And I've received the submission already from local investors who have visited my office, also expressing their displeasure on the charges which the landlords are charging them. And I can assure you that that's a matter which we are putting into consideration with the line ministry, which is the Ministry of Commerce. And I can assure you that the Minister of Commerce is 100% eager to see development coming to our country, so that issue is being attended to. But for me as a minister for the province, I will push the minister and the technocrats at the Ministry of Commerce to see how best we can handle the issue to do with rentals, especially in shopping malls in our country, because it's not only affecting the foreign investors, it is also affecting the local investors as well.
And Edcon Group Chief Executive Officer Mike Elliott says the executive team is in the country to evaluate its business operations, which have been facing financial challenges that might lead to the company downsizing on its operations in Zambia. And Edcon Chief Operations Officer Minken Mtunzi has complained of high rental charges in shopping malls in Zambia. Mr. Mtunzi states that most landlords in the shopping malls quote the rentals in United States dollars, a situation he says is disadvantaging the business looking at the performance of the kwacha.
So I like the fact that you said you have interactions with the business broadly, and maybe we would ask you to request our colleagues, our landlords that we pay rent to sharpen their pencil and see if they can come to the party so that they could make a contribution. I mean, in South Africa, we're saved by everyone wanting to make sure that we succeed. Landlords agreeing to convert debt, or the banks are agreeing to convert debt into equity, landlords agreeing to give us reprieve, unions agreeing not to demand more wages. All of us made that contribution. And I think it's what we have learned, that for us to be profitable, to grow the businesses, we need to look at the entire cost structure and get the participation of people on board, because we pay rent sometimes in US dollars, but the currency situation is different. So I think as we weigh our decisions in terms of what needs to happen, that is the reality of the context and that we are facing ourselves. And so we would ask for help wherever we can for us to continue to trade and make sure that the Zambians can participate and they can also grow themselves and their families.
Zambia's ambassador to Ethiopia, Emmanuel Mwambai, has announced the appointment of a new board of the Zambia-Ethiopia Business Forum. Mr. Mwamba says the board has been constituted in consultation with the Zambia Chamber of Commerce and Industry, ZACI, and the Non-Governmental Gender Organizations Coordinating Council, NGOCC. He says the new board comprises men and women capable of driving the agenda of the business forum. The inclusion of women in the new board of the Zambia-Ethiopia Business Forum follows the request made by the NGOCC Executive Director, Ngwase Mwale, who expressed concern over the lack of gender parity in the new board. This is contained in a statement issued by Inu Tumwanza, First Secretary of Press and Tourism at the Zambian Embassy in Ethiopia. Tourism and Arts Minister Ronald Chitotela has directed management at Mundawanga Botanical Gardens to improve the state of the facility. Speaking when he toured the facility, Mr. Chitotela expressed disappointment at the state of the gardens, especially at a time when government is trying to promote tourism in the country. He said such places needed to be taken care of to encourage more people to visit, thereby helping develop the tourism sector in the country. Here's a report.
Mundawanga Gardens in Chilanga district is well known by many people. This is because it is a place where many, especially children, go to for fun and relaxation. And today, Tourism and Arts Minister Ronald Chitotela took an impromptu visit to the garden and was unhappy with what he found.
Director, there's a great need for improvement, and we will not keep singing the song. The president came here, he sang the song. My predecessor came here, spoke about the song. I also come and expect that we will just be coming, we speak, we go, and things doesn't change. No. No. Yes. No. My direction is from now, we'll be coming back in December. We must find a total change, transformed Mundawanga Gardens. More especially the gardens. You've seen the way they are. We have nothing to tell a story about it being a garden.
Mundawanga Conservative Officer Belinda Tembo had this to say.
We prioritized the renovation of the buildings to where our clients come in. And so we halted the renovation of our office block to the animal enclosures and the car park, which is our next phase of the Tourism Development Fund. We've started reconstructing the fences in preparation for restocking after the presidential visit that had said that we needed to do a bit of restocking. And
when did the president visit?
It was in March.
Paul Ziambo is National Parks and Wildlife Director.
Honorable Minister, we will move fast. We will do whatever you want us to do, and also with the plans that we have, we will move forward. We want to promise that we will do, because we don't want it to be changed. We want to change the area. Thank you very much.
I'll hold you by your weight, and also hold me by my weight. If by December it doesn't change, hold me by my weight if human beings will not change.
The Tourism Minister has since directed management at Mundawanga Gardens to ensure that the garden has a new facelift by December 2019. Martha Katambi, QTV News in Chilanga District.
As we end the news, let's have a relook at the headlines once more. The National Democratic Congress, NDC, has challenged its deregistration by the Registrar of Societies in the High Court. Agriculture Minister Michael Katambo has dismissed assertions that government has reintroduced price controls on maize. And the opposition UPND says all its members of parliament will vote against the Constitutional Amendment Bill number 10. That's the news at this hour. Thank you so much for watching. Bye.